So today, I just wanted to talk about something we've probably all experienced. Like we've cleaned things up in our diet, right? And we're starting to feel better. And then we kind of can fall off the wagon or it slowly starts to come back, even though we're eating clean. And it's something that I have experienced with my patients and personally have experienced as well. We kind of start thinking like, what am I doing wrong, right? What am I missing? But the truth is, we might not be doing anything wrong, right? We just haven't addressed that full picture yet. So maybe changing our diet was part of the picture, but it wasn't the whole picture. And so we need to kind of reframe that. Whenever we think of inflammation, a lot of people think that that's coming from food. And yes, it can. And yes, it does. Right. But there's other things too. So, like, we cut out gluten, we cut out sugar, and we're eating cleaner. And yeah, we're feeling better, but there's still something there. That's how I started my journey too. When I was having a bunch of my issues, I cut out a bunch of trigger foods for me and it did get better, but it wasn't all the way better. I was like, man, I feel like I should be feeling better than this. And so it's because food is one of the triggers, right? It's not getting down to the final, what we call kind of root cause of what's going on. And there's still some underlying issues going on. And that's what I want to talk about today, or some of those other underlying causes that could be. But first, let's talk about inflammation a little bit. So, the best way to think about inflammation is something called allostatic load. And so, what allostatic load is, if you imagine a bucket that fills with water, and in that bucket, we have kind of holes at the bottom of that bucket. And those holes represent our body's ability to deal with things. So, like our liver and our kidneys and our lungs, and things that help us get rid of metabolic waste and toxins and all those other things. So, we have a built in system to help us with that. But sometimes, if we keep adding water to that bucket faster than we're getting stuff out, that's allostatic load. So that water would represent allostatic load. So things that we can think about stress and toxins and poor sleep and blood sugar swings and all of these things are increasing that water level in that bucket, right? And if we keep adding to that bucket day in, day out, and our system's ability is only so much, right? And that's how we see some of that inflammation happen. So when it overflows, we usually see something like a symptom. And so symptoms aren't a problem. They're kind of like a warning signal. They're that check engine light, like, hey, there's a system in my body that's overwhelmed. And this is my flashy light that I'm trying to get you to pay attention to. Right. So maybe we clean up our diet, but there's still a trigger in there that's triggering inflammation. And that could be like, hey, I've got some achy joints, or maybe I'm not sleeping the best, or hey, I get bloated after I eat. So these are all like signals, right? Are telling our body that there's still something going on. So let's talk about some of the drivers that I see. One of them is just your gut in general. Leaky gut can be a driver. So even though you've removed some of those things, the barrier is still broken, and we need to help fix that. So Hippocrates, if you've probably heard this quote before, but all disease starts in the gut. And he's not wrong. There's a lot of things that if our gut's disrupted, the whole system's going to be disrupted. The majority of our immune system lives in our gut. And I might have drawn this out for you before, but on my whiteboard, I like to draw out digestion. And what I do is I'll take the first 10 inches of your small intestine and we'll blow it up really big to your cell level. And your cells look like cubes in the small intestine, and they're attached by a little gap junction. And so they're kind of cubes that are attached to each other. And so if your gut's functioning well, you eat food, you digest, you secrete hydrochloric acid, you secrete pancreatic enzymes, you secrete bile to help you break down that food when it gets to your intestines, right? And so then once it gets small enough, it can fit through those cells, those little cube cells. The first thing it runs into is something called your gut associated lymphoid tissue. And basically, what that means is it's your immune system. Your immune system's evaluating everything coming in to make sure it's not foreign. So it's making sure it's not a bacteria or a virus or anything like that. The problem is if we have leaky gut, and we can think of those as having little holes in our cells, right? And so an undigested food particle can get in, and your immune system does not know what that is. And so it's like, I'm going to attack this foreign substance like it's a bacteria or like it's a virus, causes inflammation. That's what we call a food sensitivity, right? And so if your gut is constantly, if it's permeable, it's food sensitivities can be things that you're normally eating. So for me, when I first had leaky gut, I did a food sensitivity test and I had like 40 different foods, and it was all foods I was eating regularly. Sweet potatoes. I was doing paleo pretty hardcore back then. So sweet potatoes and coconut and almonds and like all these things that are good for us. My gut was permeable, so my immune system was like, not having it. And so I started to react to those things. And so you might experience bloating or reflux or loose stools, constipation, food sensitivities that keep on stacking up. That's a sign that there's leaky gut, and the gut can be a driver of why you keep having those things. On a side note, when I run stool tests on people, there's something called zonulin. So zonulin, if we imagine our cells, right? Zonulin is a gap junction, so it helps open up a gap between our cells to bigger molecules to get in that are intended to. So like broccoli, for instance, has a bigger molecule than can fit through the cell in the cell. So it separates the cells and allows it to come in. So zonulin, gluten secretes zonulin to keep those cells open longer. So gluten can cause a false and leaky gut, basically, keep zonulin open for longer. The other thing that I really see is drive up zonulin is mold and mycotoxins. So if that's in the system and you're breathing that in, it can cause high zonulin in your gut and keep your gap junctions open longer, which causes inflammation. And so that's leaky gut. So that's one of the drivers that I see with people. So it's kind of like if you're eating some food sensitivities, one of the things I kind of equate that to too is if you have a scab and you keep peeling off the scab, you still have the wound, right? So if you're eating a food sensitivity, you're peeling the scab off every time you do that. You're opening that wound and your system has to close that wound again. So it's kind of like that. You're having repetitive inflammation. So that's the driver number one, it's the gut. The next driver that I see that increases that inflammatory load is your toxic load. And so your body can constantly be dealing with a toxin that's just driving up inflammation. So the FDA has registered 80,000 chemicals. We didn't have that kind of load 150 years ago, right? That's all kind of new stuff. Our bodies are still trying to figure out what the heck to do with all these toxins, from scented candles to cleaning products to laundries to all of these different scents that we run into. There's 80,000 registered, right? They haven't tested all those. We have no clue what they do, but we do know a lot of them disrupt our hormones. So think about that bucket, right? Allostatic load. Our bucket's getting fuller of these things. So that's what we talk about, just trying to clean up our environment in that sense. Like, what kind of smells are we smelling? What are we putting on our body? What kind of topical things are we putting on our body? What kind of shampoos? What kind of soaps? All of that stuff can be either a good input or a bad input that we're looking at. So it's not one of those things where we have to be nervous or scared of. It's the more knowledge we have with this, the more empowered we can become and start making those changes. So it doesn't have to happen overnight. It's just one of those things that, like, hey, when it runs out, replace it with something better. Mold, huge in the environment. And I've since probably COVID, I've seen a ton of more mold patients. So I don't know what's happening with that, but there is a lot more mold that I'm running into. So one out of two houses, when they've done studies on this, one out of two houses have mold in them. So it's pretty prevalent, and we're starting to react to it a little bit more. The theories is basically those nice 80,000 registered chemicals is not allowing us to deal with mold where we previously could. So it's increasing that allostatic load in general. Heavy metals, mercury, pretty big around here if you have any fillings. Arsenic, really big around here. Uranium, really big around here. So that's another allostatic load. Microplastics, plastic bottles, and all of that fun plastic stuff that's endocrine disrupting. VOCs, so this goes into our environment as well. So that stands for volatile or organic compounds. That's things like when you get new furniture, like the new smells that are coming off of that, right? That's volatile organic compounds, paints, flooring, and stuff like that. That's all VOCs. And then something else that contributes to that chronic toxic load is chronic infections. So you can think of whenever our body's fighting something like a virus or a bacteria, those things, you can kind of think of it as like bacteria poop. They have to clean up that metabolic waste from that thing that's happening. And so that's another just added load to our allostatic load. So if you're not eliminating well, it increases our toxic load. That's one of the stuck spots I see with people. This one can take a while too. If you have a big toxic load, it can take time to come out because most likely it didn't happen overnight. It was probably like years of accumulation and it can take a little while to come out. So you got to be patient with that. A little clinical pearl, toxins can get stuck in the sinuses. So even though like downstream you're doing really good, if you're just constantly have something here, that can be driving that symptomatology. So remember the daily bowel movement's huge. That's helping getting toxins out, hydration and minerals. So getting enough water, but making sure you have minerals with it. Sweating, foot baths, movement, all these things help with supporting that detox pathway. So if you don't clear out well, inflammation can stick around. It could be driving that for you. So driver number three, the nervous system. This is one people really underestimate, and it's often dysregulated. And a lot of people, if your body stays in that chronic stress, fight or flight state, it's prioritizing survival over healing. So you're just constantly stuck in that survival mode. You're just basically surviving instead of thriving is what I tell people. Your digestion is going to slow down, your detox is going to get hampered, your hormones are going to shift, you're going to store more cortisol, more belly fat for that cortisol, and then inflammation is going to constantly be there. So this might manifest as something like poor sleep or like tight muscles, stiffness, feeling wired but tired. These are all things that you're not healing and you're in a stressed state. So how you can help unwrap some of this. Some people need deeper work into this, something like a neurofeedback. I really like Brain Tap, and that's like an at-home neurofeedback unit you can turn on. A lot of my patients like it. It's one of those you can download an app. I think it's like $20 a month or something like that. But neurofeedback can be really helpful to calm that nervous system down. When we get to the base of it, breathing, right? If you're stuck in fight or flight, you'll have shallow breathing and it'll be more rapid. Your rate will be more rapid. So just working on breathing, our normal respiration rate should be somewhere around 5 to 6 seconds in, 5 to 6 seconds out. That's a normal respiration rate. When you work on breathing, box breathing, like we've talked about, 4-7-8 breathing, these are really good, just nervous system breath work type of breathing. So just working on it daily can help. And then working on your sleep routine is huge. Your ability to recover and recuperate is the sleep. So if you're not getting sleep, trying different things out to help sleep, getting in a sleep routine, sometimes like glycine, magnesium glycinate, some supplements like that can really be helpful for people sleeping. So you just got to kind of experiment around and really dial in that sleep because that's going to be huge for that nervous system. And then driver number four that I see is just blood sugar dysregulation. So your blood sugar is going from high to low to high to low to high to low. The Living Light stuff, the metabolic program, that really does a great job at stabilizing blood sugar. But when your blood sugar is unstable, it's going to cause inflammation. It's going to cause hormone disruption. That cortisol is going to be elevated, and then you're going to get the energy crashes. So you eat, you feel better, and then after you're eating, you crash, right? So that's blood sugar. And even when you're eating quote unquote healthy, if your meals aren't really balanced, you can still get blood sugar issues. Another big one too is if you have toxins in the system, it can really dysregulate your blood sugar. So that's another tie in between toxins and blood sugar. But most of the time, if we balance our meals, this can really be helpful. So the timing of the meals, if the meals aren't balanced, if you're not getting enough protein, if you're under eating or if you're overeating. So those are things that can really affect blood sugar. The females, you guys tend to not eat enough protein. You got to eat more protein, and that in the form of lean protein. I like the perfect aminos to get some protein in, really good. But you got to start with protein and build your way up with that. So if you're not eating enough, or if you're overeating, those are both bad. It's all about balance and balance within the meal too. Okay. So if you're the type of person that's saying like, hey, I cleaned up my diet, but I'm still feeling inflamed. So there's something else driving that. There's something in the gut. Maybe there's an infection, there's inflammation, there's a detox pathway that's stuck. Your nervous system might be dysregulated, or maybe it's just your blood sugar that's all over the place. Those are common things that I see in that realm of when you're still feeling inflamed. So what can we do about it? We've kind of talked about a couple of things, but let's try to keep it simple, right? Food, when it comes to food, what are your big triggers? Some people it's gluten. That's a big one. I'll tell you, a majority of my people that I get off gluten, they feel better. That's a big trigger. But it can be other things. Some people react to eggs. Some people react to dairy. Some people react to corn. So you got to experiment a little bit with that. And just start paying attention to how you feel after you eat. And it might not be right after you eat. It might be 3 hours later you crash, or it might be the next day that you're like, man, I feel groggy today, or I didn't sleep well. So you just start. That's where journaling can really be come into handy. Okay, I ate, and then the next day I felt like crap. It's like, okay, start putting that together. What did you eat? What was in that meal? Or maybe it was like gluten, dairy, and corn, and all of the things in that same meal. And I'm like, okay, well, you got to separate out some of those. So next time that you're going to eat some of those things, maybe not eat one of those things, or maybe just eat one of those things so you can see if it's one of those things that's causing it. And it can be all of them. So that's the tough part about leaky gut. It's a lot of the things that you're eating. So try to find the biggest triggers, what you're doing. Gluten's a big one. Lectins are a big one. And lectin is just a protein found in certain, it's in all grains, but it's also in nightshade vegetables is probably the biggest area for lectins. That's really irritating to the gut. So find what your triggers are. Start with protein. Get your protein in, especially early. My females, they need to, if you're not doing like the fast like a girl stuff, which is fasting around cycle, and even when you're not having a cycle, just a 30-day kind of cycle where you're eating a little more carbohydrates and eating breakfast sometimes, and sometimes you're fasting. That's where I really like to get my females. But you got to start with protein. And then no eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. That's another big one as well. So you're reducing your load through your inflammation of the food you're eating. And then the next thing, toxins, you still got to start identifying what they are and eliminating them. This can take some time, so you got to be patient. One of the pound for pound, one of the best things that I love is saunas. They're awesome. That can help decrease your load, but you got to identify what it is. If you're constantly breathing in mold or constantly breathing in a chemical, start to fix that. And then stressors, what's keeping you in fight or flight, and start working on that. Do we need to adjust your sleep? Do we need to prioritize your sleep? Like darker room, cooler, mouth tape, getting in a routine where you're going to bed and waking up at the same time. Like, what do we need to do to help that sleep be more optimal? That nervous system too. So like, do you need to set a timer and do breathing for 5 to 10 minutes before you go to sleep? That's a great practice to do. Do you need to do a gratitude journal? Do you need to do some neurofeedback? What's going to help that nervous system calm down? So you got to start experimenting with that. And then nutrients. Start thinking about nutrients. When we eat, are we getting our nutrients in? Are we digesting them? Maybe something like leaky gut needs to be addressed. A lot of times I'll do a stool test to see if zonulin is really high, and that tells me, hey, leaky gut's probably an issue here. And then the last thing that I like to talk about for building your capacity is movement. So our fascia, which is our connective tissue that is right under our skin layer, it needs movement, and it needs consistently moving. So start thinking morning and kind of evening routines for that. So like just moving around, walking, yeah, is great. Range of motion things, your fascia, like your big toe and your feet are huge in fascia. So like just rolling your feet on a ball, that's great for your fascia. Foam rolling can be really good for fascia, but start to get that fascia moving and getting it less stiff. That's super good for that fascia and just movement in general. So we kind of start with walking and then we try to build on that. So if you're like, yeah, I'm doing good walking, I'm like, great, start working on your fascia. And how do you do that? Start rolling it out first. That's a good first step. And after that, usually I like to just do functional type movements. So getting in and doing squats is a good functional movement. Getting through that range of motion and just starting wherever you need to start, wherever you're on your journey. If you can only do a quarter squat, I'm like, great, do a quarter squat. And then after a few weeks, try to do a little bit more than a quarter squat. Maybe get into the half squat and then you build on that. But the important thing with movement is consistency over time. It doesn't have to be huge. It could be 2-3 minutes. Start with that. Maybe build into a 10-minute. And so it's not quick fixes, but you're trying to restore that system, right? That's how we can get more of a lasting change. Just pick something wherever your stuck spot is, and especially one of these 4 areas can be like, hey, here's some actionable things I can do right now, and pick one, start doing it. We kind of talked about make sure you're having daily bowel movements, building meals with protein, starting with protein. Moving after meals is another good one. Just 10-minute walk or less even can be super helpful. Morning light, like we've talked about a ton, screen stuff, blue light glasses, like getting at your eyes into the sunshine is huge, huge, especially in the morning. That helps your circadian. And then making sure you're hydrated. Sometimes not just plain water, sometimes a pinch of sea salt and getting some minerals in with it. But these things that can be super simple like that can be one of the most powerful things you can see in changing your physiology. So remember, inflammation is not something your body is doing to you. It's something your body is doing for you. It's signaling you. There's something awry, right? It's trying to protect you. Bodies are intelligent. That's how we were made, right? We have an intelligent system that's telling our body like, hey, there's something going on. This is our check engine light. There's something happening. This food you're putting into me is causing some irritation, right? So our job is to lower that stress on the system and then support the system that can help you heal. Okay. When you do that, the body does what it's designed to do. So gut stuff, really huge toxic load, really huge nervous system work, and then that blood sugar regulation. That's why inflammation can keep coming back.